Hey, welcome back to Mocktails with Marina. I'm your host, Marina, and today we've got Sam of Third Place Bar NYC here to discuss events and its context to today's NA beverage space. There's so much to unpack and uncover, so let's go ahead and dive right in. Thank you so much for joining us today, Sam.
Hey Marina, thanks for having me.
So glad to have you here and really excited to get this perspective from you, an event coordinator in New York who focuses on the non-alc side of things. So let's start off by just giving us some context. What is Third Place Bar NYC?
Yeah, so Third Place Bar NYC is a project that I started almost 2 years ago at this point. I initially had the idea of launching a brick and mortar non-alcoholic bar, kind of just like a classic bar. I wanted to go for sort of like a dive bar vibe and just make it non like alcohol free. And because obviously starting, any kind of brick and mortar business here in New York City, especially hospitality with the rents and everything, is just a little pricey. I just started out running post pop-up events. I started hosting events at coffee shops sort of after hours. I did lots of social events, just like bar nights, trivia nights, and all of that. And I always had the idea of, eventually switching over to a brick and mortar location once I've kind of figured out the industry. I figured out what my customers want, but kind of just get stuck with hosting the events because they're actually really, really fun. So Third Place Bar is sort of an abstract concept now, an abstract bar of an abstract space where people get together, meet each other, socialize, make connections, and at all without alcohol. And at the same time, I also, I post a lot on social media. I have a Substack. I work with a lot of brands to do sort of brand activations and promotion for them. So I'm basically just like a all-around non-alc kind of uh, event host, and person and content creator at this point.
It's so cool. I love that you have not only multiple avenues of helping
Mhm.
people, but obviously multiple revenue streams, multiple ways of making impact, not only on the industry, but the people who want to interact with it and consume things. I'm so curious, what got you, started in wanting to do this in the first place? Is there, especially, in your area specifically, since I know New York has many, many pockets. But what's it like for you and your like just existing? Like, let's say you walk out of your house right now
Mhm.
and you wanted to do something non-alc that you did
Mhm.
not put together. What's it like for you right now in New York?
So right now, funny enough, I feel like I might have like manifested this because when I first thought about the idea of a non-alc bar, there was nothing here. Then Hecate opened, literally right on my block. Funny enough, like on the other side of this block. And
Yay.
then multiple other non-alcoholic bars, like fully non-alcoholic bars open, all within let's say 15-minute walking distance from my house. So I don't know what happened, but it's kind of funny that I just had that idea and then all of a sudden it sort of started popping up around me. So right now we have four completely non-alcoholic bars, cafes, anti-bars in the East Village, literally within like a 15 to 20-minute walk from my house, funny enough.
Oh, that's cool. And I love to see it. And I'm sure it's going to expand even more. For example, I was on where was I? I was on either on Threads or X earlier, and I saw that there's this new bar space. I don't even know what they're specifically
Mhm.
categorizing it as, but it's kind of like a tea shop, has some non-alc options, but it's also like an infrared kind of wellness spot.
Mm.
So it's like kind of like a day spa that also
Hmm.
has a bar, but no alcohol at it. That is not in New York. That is I'll have to go back and remember where that is. But point of the story is an expanding like definition of what a non-alc space could be. I
Hmm.
love that you mentioned earlier how you do events not only at traditional bars, but you have these other spots. So all that being said, what's it like to uh host an event at a space that's already like already is zero proof, like perhaps like a tea shop or a coffee shop,
Mhm.
versus trying to have a sober event at a place that ordinarily serves alcohol?
Ooh, that's a great question. So it is infinitely easier to host it at a place that already is completely alcohol free. And it also just in terms of how I promote the event and how I talk about it to my audience makes it a lot easier because I can say it's alcohol free. So regardless of, where you're at in your sobriety journey or how you feel about being around alcohol, this is certainly a safer space than a regular bar. And also at the same time, the people like who run the event or who run the those venues are already bought into the whole idea of alcohol-free events. So I don't have to convince them. So it's very um it's a incredibly welcoming environment. And I've worked with a lot of the non-alc bars here in the neighborhood. I've done some events at Rent Money Lounge. I've hosted happy hours, weekly happy hours at Hecate at the OG Sober Bar. I'm planning an event at No More Cafe, which is another non-alc cafe, sort of slightly more upscale. And then I'm also thinking about doing something at Cosmic Community, so really engaging with them. And they're all like, it's not even a question like, oh, how are we going to make money? Are people going to come? Because, that's they're sort of bought into the same idea. Whereas with venues that aren't completely alcohol free, it's a little bit more difficult for me to market it to my audience because, I know in general, I would say my audience is like not necessarily it's definitely not entirely people who are sober in recovery, doing programs or anything. It's definitely more aimed at people who are sort of, I call it lifestyle sober or wellness sober, sort of people who are like, yeah, I guess I'm just not going to drink or I'm going to drink less, um, who are comfortable being around alcohol. So it's not that severe, but it still makes it so much easier for me to say it's an alcohol-free event in an alcohol-free space. Than it's an alcohol-free event, but there's going to be liquor up on the shelves. You just have to pretend it's not there. It's always a little bit, it feels a little, um, it feels a little difficult for me to sort of really get fully behind that. Um, and then also at the same time, just working with bar owners, bartenders to kind of convince them that yes, it is important to have good non-alcoholic options. Yes, there will be money coming in from drink sales because obviously they're expecting everyone to just be for events to come in and, drink at the bar and pay money for those drinks. So most events in New York City, it's usually the deal is with bars is basically you have a drink minimum or like a bar tab minimum, and once you reach that minimum of what people consume, you basically get the space for free. And that is a lot more difficult with non-alcoholic drinks. People drink a little less. No one's gonna have like 3 or 4 mocktails in a row, but maybe 1 or 2. Whereas like people will probably have 3 beers or vodka sodas or whatever it is in a row over the course of the night, if they're drinking alcohol. So there's a little bit more work that needs to be done to convince them to figure out the exact business model of the event to make sure everyone is happy because in the end, like the bars, as much as they want to support alcohol-free events, they just obviously have to look at the bottom line and make sure they're not losing money on it and it's worth their time and effort too. So yeah, it's a pretty big difference. So, which is why I love the fact that we have so many alcohol-free spaces in the city now that are open late, where I can really just approach the owners and say, "Hey, can we host a happy hour there?" And they'll be like, "Sure." Like this all makes sense. Having sober people at my space makes perfect sense because it is an alcohol-free space.
Mm. This is, making my brain go four different directions at the same time because on one hand, of course, it's really exciting to see the rise of new non-alc spaces. On the other hand, I mean, it takes time to get more non-alc spaces into the mix.
Mm,
So for right now, in a lot of places, seemingly, we only have traditional bars to work with, right? So, uh, first thing I want to mention and bring up in a previous conversation, we mentioned the difficulty surrounding alcohol sponsorships and
mhm.
what that plays in the role in bars. So, I'm curious from your perspective, when you are approaching traditional bars that still serve alcohol, you know, what are the reasons that they turn you down when you are speaking with them?
Yeah, it would mostly be, again, just the expectations of, okay, we're running an event with, let's say, 50 people, and they just expect to make a certain amount of money, which that might just not happen, with, or they think it might not happen with people who don't drink alcohol. A lot of times also when the bars don't have a full, a non-alc menu that I find particularly attractive, where I know people will be excited and they will be buying drinks, that makes it really difficult because then I will have to bring in brands from outside. So I will basically say, okay, how about we add these two brands to the menu? And there's usually the owners might hesitate because they're saying, oh, we don't want to deal with the logistics of getting more stuff. This is too difficult. What are our margins going to look like? So hospitality owners always like the main conversation is always about the margins and the markup. And our, customers going to accept it. So that is definitely pretty challenging. So one of the sort of deals I have been able to work out with some of the bars that I've done events with is I basically get product donated. It's like the brands basically donate, let's say, a case of non-alcoholic spirits, and then the bars can sell this, as part of just their cocktail menu or their special zero proof menu for that particular event, and basically get the product, like the non-alc product, for free, but still can have the margins of the drinks that they sell on their regular menu. So that way they're basically getting the benefit of free product. They're selling the drinks, they're making money, and they don't necessarily have the risk of, oh, we have to buy an A product and we don't know if it's going to sell. Um, but also to be completely honest, I think pretty much the majority of bars that I have worked with that do sell alcohol, bars and restaurants, um, they have actually approached me about a collaboration, and we're already, you know, at least partially bought into the concept of hosting a non-alc event. So
Yay.
yes, so I've been very lucky to have like inbound, um, you know, leads basically, and have bars approaching me to say, hey, we want to do more non-alc stuff. How do you feel about collaborating? And the few bars that I approached, or restaurants, I did a really amazing collaboration with Modern Love, which is a really, really great vegan restaurant in Brooklyn. Isa, the chef of that restaurant, she's been one of my heroes basically for really since I was a teenager, since she started her cooking blog. And I wasn't even vegan for, most of my life. I was only vegan for a very short period of time, but I think she's just super cool, super interesting personality. And I approached her, sent her an email in the middle of the night just because I felt like I should try it and give it a shot, and said, hey, how do you feel about doing a non-alc pop-up? And she said, sounds great. We don't even have a full cocktail menu anyway. Let's do it. And she was just super bought into it. So I think really if there's any kind of advice I could give anyone is to wait for inbound leads, um, or to really even just approach a conversation with people like owners of hospitality business that are already bought into the concept of having alcohol-free events and having an alcohol-free menu, because at that point it's only figuring out the logistics, but it's not, having to convince someone that this is actually a good idea. Because there are a lot of people in hospitality will say, like, what, like alcohol-free events? That's stupid. Like, why would you do that? No one's gonna come. Why would you go to a bar if you don't drink alcohol, right? So at that point it's not even worth trying to convince them. It's so much more satisfying and rewarding to start at a place where they're already excited about the concept and excited about the idea and want to make it work. And then you'll usually find a solution.
Yes. This is so cool that you were approached in this scenario. And, another guest we'll be having on this podcast in the coming weeks, we'll be talking with Derek Santiago,
Mhm.
who For those of you who don't know, he has a really awesome mocktail mixology book out.
Hmm.
We saw it at Barnes and Noble last week. I wanted to bring that up because his story is he was approached to make that book.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
that's just another example. I mean, there's so many in the industry where it's if you're just authentically being you and you're just letting people know, hey, this is what I do, this is how I love to help people, they will naturally come, assuming that
Mhm.
you have, you are putting in the work of putting yourself out there. I think that's so cool.
Yeah.
And it also goes to kind of mimic the society level conversation that people have regarding sobriety, right? It's not like if you have a friend who drinks, it's not like you're like, have you tried sobriety? Because that's called an intervention, right? So it's like a lot of times I noticed that some businesses when because I do the cold lead reach out as well, where it's like,
Mhm.
sometimes we'll just email bars, restaurants, wedding venues, you name it.
Mhm.
And sometimes we get nothing, but every once in a while, people will be like, oh my gosh, I was looking for that. But
Yeah.
one time we received one that was like, why would you think that that's something like, are you trying to push your ideas, whatever? And we're like, whoa,
Uh-huh.
like, okay, you're
Yeah.
triggered there. That was one of those things that also helped us see, of course, it's always, great in business to reach out to cold leads here and there, but
Mhm.
truly being that magnet to
Mhm.
people who are already want to do what you do, but
Mhm.
there's just the details they need to figure out, right? So
Yep.
leads me to my next question. People who don't understand what event work is, they just think that you're just like this professional party girl, when in
Yeah.
reality, it's a lot of work. So what
Okay.
does a day in a life look like for you to just plan one of these events?
Ooh, yeah, there's a lot going on. There's a lot of coordination. I spend a lot more time sending emails and on phone calls than people maybe might imagine. So it's usually waking up, going through my emails, making sure I respond to anything that came in, especially in hospitality and with a lot of the non-alc brands because they're small, like one person, two-person teams, they sort of work around the clock. So I get emails very late at night. I have an ongoing joke with Ian from All the Bitter where whenever he sends me emails or responds to my email at like 11 o'clock at night, I just say like this is great, but why are you still checking your emails? So yeah, it's all like small independent businesses. They're always working around the clock. So it's a lot of going through emails, coordinating. And usually I'm sort of the middleman between, the venue, making sure everything is set there. And then also the brands, just coordinating brand sponsorship, delivery, shipping for any kind of product. Is it going to get shipped to the venue? Is it going to get shipped to my house? When is it going to arrive? And then also at the same time promoting the event. So making sure, I set up Eventbrite or any kind of event pages where people can buy tickets or RSVP, making flyers, promoting, posting on social media, and then also, if I'm collaborating with another event host, like I did last week, for example, for our Sober Curious Singles Mixer, I collaborated with Elle, who runs Met Through Friends, which is a series of dating events where you bring a plus one. So every guest brings a plus one. So you're not alone. It's less awkward. So I coordinated with Elle, and it's just also, again, lots of emails, text messages, phone calls sometimes to say like, oh, when are we going to post this? Is the ticket page up? How many tickets have we already sold? What time are we going to get to the venue? So that's basically sort of the all the prep that happens like leading up to the event. And then the day off, I usually make sure I have enough time to if I want to batch any drinks, like any cocktails, to batch the cocktails. I usually do that at home. I pack everything into bags and boxes, make sure it's neat and all. I have everything. I have a pack list to make sure I don't forget anything important because that tends to happen sometimes that you're like, oh no, I forgot the name tags or I forgot the garnishes for this drink. So making sure everything is packed, batching the drinks, and then I usually Uber over to the venue because I don't have a car because this is New York City. Get to the venue maybe, an hour and a half before the event, start setting up everything, set up the bar, set up the drinks, rearrange furniture if need be, talk to the venue owners, the host there, meet the other hosts. And then, the event happens, checking people in, being the hostess with the mostest, walking around, talking to people, making sure if someone seems like standing by themselves, I make a connection, I introduce them to someone. So there's a lot of like actual just hosting involved. And then after the event, cleaning up, making sure everything is neat, making sure the venue owners are happy, packing up all my stuff, taking it home. Sometimes I end up carrying a lot of very, very heavy things back up my stairs at 11 o'clock at night, which is very exhausting, makes me question my life choices occasionally. I used to have there's a bar downstairs right in my building, and there used to be a bouncer outside, and obviously because I would see him every night coming home, we made friends, and at some point he saw me carrying all these heavy things up the stairs, and he's like, "Girl, I'm not gonna let you carry these things up the stairs." So for a while, for about 2 months, I was extremely lucky, and I had the bouncer downstairs helping me carry heavy stuff up
Aw.
the stairs, which was the sweetest things. I brought him drinks out because he didn't drink either, which is funny. So I brought him non-alcoholic cocktails outside. Yeah, Michael, if you hear this, where are you? I need you.
Aw, Michael, come
Um,
back.
yeah, so funny. And then yeah, and then it's usually, making sure everything that needs to go in the fridge, any leftover drinks or anything goes in the fridge, making sure there's nothing like wet in there, leftover garnishes or whatever. And then I usually just crash and go to bed. And then that like the event doesn't end there because after that I have to do, you know, put everything back into my storage unit where it makes sense. Make sure the financials are all taken care of. Like, do I need to pay someone? Is someone paying me? I usually post recaps of the event, like all the photos, videos on social media, or write up a recap on my Substack. So I have been talking for a very long time, but I hope that gives you an impression of, the kind of work involved there. And I'm a one-person team, so I'm doing pretty much everything at the moment. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a big job. Back in the day when I was an event producer as like circus and burlesque shows.
No.
And while we didn't have to make cocktails and have garnishes, I mean, I remember it would take more than a month if
Mm,
it was a monthly show,
mm,
because I already had the template, but it would take a month to put all the things together, work so hard the week of, then day of, and then, you see people showing up for the event that's, a few hours long,
mm.
and you're there after, you're doing everything during that whole process, and you're like, this is my
Yeah.
life. And they're like, it's only
Yeah.
been a couple hours.
Yeah.
It's like, there's a lot that goes into these events and
Yeah.
all the details.
Yeah. No, it's a lot. It's really all the small details, even just something like making the menu for the day and making sure the menu is printed and I have the menu stands and everything, right? And everything on the menu is accurate, and I have the exact amount of drinks. Last week we ran out of drinks at the event because I had undercalculated how many we were going to need because we actually had a better turnout than expected.
Yay.
So we ran out of drinks, which is maybe a good problem to have, but obviously I felt a little bad. So there's yeah, it's all the details, every single detail from the yeah, the drinks, the menu, having things printed, having all the activities, did I pack the tea lights? Did I pack the candles? Did I pack the small bottles that I use for the flowers? Did I do this? Did I do that? It really is a lot of prep work that, you know, well, if you do it really well, no one will ever notice, and that's great, right? That's kind of the point of being an event coordinator and hosting good events, is that you don't notice how much effort goes into that. You just see the finished product and think, oh, this is great.
It's true. And one other thing I just thought of is, again, back when I was running my shows, I didn't have to explain anything to anyone. And in fact, the less they knew, the better, because then
Mhm.
they would be like grabbing drinks, throwing money in the tip jars. But in this case, you have sober people that you are not only entertaining, but then you have an entire uh, group of entrepreneurs, in this case, whether it's the owner of the business, maybe you have servers who aren't used to serving these products in any
Mhm.
way. I'm curious, how much extra time do you have to devote to educating people both during the event and surrounding the event on the non-alcohol options that you bring?
That's a great question. It really depends on the venue. Again, like if I'm working with a venue that is already alcohol free or something like a coffee shop where they maybe don't even care too much about what drinks are being served because it's not on their menu. It's usually like really straightforward and people are just excited. If I'm working with a bar or restaurant that isn't super deep into non-alc, there's definitely a lot of education. So the what I usually do is I kind of talk to them up front about sort of what they're interested in, what direction they want to go into with the drinks. And then I just grab bottles from the big stash that I have at home here of the non-alcoholic spirits or ready to drinks or beers that I think would be attractive to the bartender or beverage director or chef in the case of Modern Love, and cart it all over to their venue, do a tasting with them, and then sort of take it from there, either developing the drinks together or letting them do the sort of R&D. So there's definitely a lot of, yeah, just listening to what they're interested in, what kind of flavor profiles they're going for. Also, their stance on alcohol analogs, so non-alcoholic tequilas, non-alcoholic whiskeys, non-alcoholic gins. Some, bartenders, beverage directors might feel like, why are we doing this? This is silly, but might be open to other types of non-alcoholic spirits like botanicals, for example, or, non-alcoholic amaros, aperitifs, any kind of distilled botanicals that are not trying to emulate regular spirits. A lot of people are more open towards those. So I kind of have to always figure out like would they be interested in a non-alcoholic tequila or would they go like no, this is silly, why are we doing this, and lean more towards something that is completely its own category. So that's kind of, yeah, there's a lot of education for sure, but it's exciting because like again usually the people that I work with are already bought into the whole idea but just don't know where to start, and they're excited to taste different things and try things out, and I think that's also like just to be a little judgmental here, maybe it's to me that's the hallmark of a good bartender and a good cocktail mixologist is to be interested in and excited about working with new products and working with things that are not necessarily familiar and just to do actual R&D, like actual research and development there.
Yeah, judge away, my friend, because I agree. I love that you bring this up too, because I come from a functional mixology background, and by that I mean I have worked in so many jobs behind bars, whether I was a barista or a cava tender, where I've worked with so many functional ingredients, different teas. I had also spent a lot of time in kava bars, both as a patron and as a chief operations officer. And, it's so interesting coming into this industry. I personally am not really interested in alcohol analogs like
Mm,
as a consumer.
mm,
But, we have to try all the things. We have to figure out who likes what and what
mm,
events work best for certain things. So
mhm,
to hear that there's actually a spread of people
mhm,
some people are into alcohol analogs, some people are into just the function, but the fact that
mhm,
you can kind of showcase how wide and expansive the non-alc industry is through these events, I think it's brilliant, and I think it's exactly what's needed,
mhm.
especially because of the fact that like once we throw sobriety into the conversation, and we start talking about some of these functional botanicals, well, technically some of those fall out of reach for some sober
Yeah,
people. Some sober
yeah.
people don't want to touch kava, and then others, for example, credit kava to keeping them from
Mhm.
relapsing. So it's just such a wide variety of people consuming a wide variety of things. So when it comes back to the event space, I'm I'd love to hear from you. When it comes to the little activities that people are doing in these events,
Mhm.
regardless of what they're drinking other than alcohol, how does that change the way an event layout is? For example, if you go to like a concert or a karaoke event in a traditional alcoholic bar, it's pretty standard process, the same everywhere. But the moment
Mhm.
you enter a non-alc space, sometimes things are a little bit different.
Yeah, I would say they are and they aren't. So, for example, I ran a few trivia nights last year, and I think I'm gonna bring back trivia. It was a lot of fun. And they were, you would not have been able to tell that it was a non-alc event. It was at a coffee shop. We had like tables set up for teams. People walked up to the bar, bought drinks, and they just happened to be non-alcoholic. So you were not able to tell that it was a sober trivia event. So, and that's actually, to be honest, like that's actually what I'm sort of trying to accomplish is that it's not very different from the version with alcohol, mostly because I want to show to people that, you know, just not drinking alcohol doesn't have to mean you have to change things or things have to be completely different or have to have new activities or new environments, but you can actually do the exact same things that you used to do. You just whatever is in your glass or in your can or in front of you or in your bottle is a different beverage. But aside from that, like a lot of like oftentimes the events are actually very identical. Having said that, um, I would say there's one type of events that does require some adjustment, which is any kind of mixer. So any kind of just social event without, a specific activity like a movie night or a trivia night or whatever it is. Um, that usually requires some thought into making it successful because it's kind of funny if you think about it that when you run a general, just a social mixer, a happy hour, a singles mixer, all of these, there's no activity. It's literally just show up and the activity is kind of you're drinking and talking to people. And that gets kind of a little weird and awkward when you're not drinking because people then say like, so what do you do there if you don't drink? Um, and obviously like, people still meet each other and show up and have conversations and everything, and it actually works out pretty well. But to facilitate that, I usually try and add small activities like I have icebreaker cards on the table so people can kind of have a conversation, use that as a conversation starter. Just like questions like where's your favorite place to go on vacation, for example. Things like that, where you kind of get to know the other person a little bit, but also keep it light. And then also, small hands-on activities are actually really, really great. So one thing I did at a recent event is I had nail stickers. I don't know if that means anything. It's just like really, really tiny stickers that you can peel off and then stick on your nail. And then they last for quite a while. And it's like, like little hearts or smiley faces or flowers or just like little lightning bolts, just like to decorate your nails, basically, kind of like nail art. And just having these at a table where everyone could sit around and sort of, you know, work in silence a little bit, but also chat with the person next to them or kind of say like, oh, this looks really cute and compliment each other. That worked extremely well, I think, to take a little bit of the pressure out if you show to up to an event, and you're literally just like your job for the next 2 hours is just to stand in front of other people full frontal and just talk to them. And that can be really daunting. So having this like slightly more, let's say, introverted activity where people can sort of like sit down, put their head down a little bit, put up the stickers. Another one of those is a jigsaw puzzle. Just having a collective jigsaw puzzle on the table can be a really great activity because people will sit around it. They will, start building the jigsaw puzzle, but also still have a little bit of a conversation, but it's not 100% the focus, but just maybe like 50% of your focus is the conversation and 50% is the jigsaw puzzle. And that really takes a lot of the pressure and the stress and the anxiety out of interacting with other people. So that's one thing I would always recommend is if you just have like a singles mixer, or sorry, not a singles mixer, if you just have like a social mixer without like a main activity like a trivia night or a movie night or a cocktail class or anything like that, if it's just a social event, having small activities is really helpful in an alcohol-free environment. Last year we ran a really big outdoor picnic, and obviously, when as soon as you're outdoors, you have so many activities. We had I think it's called spike ball. We had a spike ball thing set up. We had frisbees. We had giant Jenga, things like that where people just have something to do.
Yeah. Aw. Giving people activities, giving them something to do with their fidgety fingers so that they're not, feeling uncomfortable. Like that's really the key, and that's what's really crucial here. And I love that we're having this conversation, especially because as a New Yorker, you get to provide this context that is just so different from where I am. So I'm
Mhm.
based between Phoenix and Vegas. And while,
Mhm.
yes, those are some big cities with lots of fun things in them, the funny part about like when I moved out west, because I was born in Chicago,
Mhm.
when I moved out west, I immediately noticed like this huge difference. Like the United States, all the states are different in so many ways, but especially the more west I moved, the more I was like, wow, like people are really into like wellness here. So
Mhm.
being in I had produced shows in Wisconsin and like everything was so beer oriented.
Mhm.
Everything, it was like beer pong, beer this, beer that. Then once I came out here, I swear I went to a Cirque du Soleil party and like with the cast and no one had a beer in their hand. Like,
Wow.
well, a lot of people were smoking weed or having some edibles or something, but for the most part, everyone literally was drinking some sort of mocktail, like of
Mhm.
some kind, and it was so cool to see because again, I walked in like, Midwestern hospitality, totally not being aware of how different things were.
Mhm.
Now that was years ago at this point, and now I see, when I look at events around here and where mocktail bars pop up the most. We see them at like yoga and wellness events. Lululemon throws them all the time.
Mhm.
Um, even weddings. So, for example, my husband and we got married last year and we did a non-alc bar at our wedding. We had kava, kratom, CBD, and then just some other like tasty things that had no function in them.
Mhm.
So we had something for a little bit of everybody. And it was so wild how it changed everything because people focused on the little activities at our wedding. Like they went to the little like our sign-in table and played with the Polaroid
Mhm.
camera more.
Cute.
When we did the projector of like family photos, all the old things, like people actually gathered around them and talked about like family memories instead of just
Mhm.
like a thing in the background.
Yeah.
The dance floor suffered a little bit. I will say
Mhm.
that. Like people weren't dancing as much,
Yeah.
which that wasn't honestly that important to us anyway. We really wanted to connect with people and we realized that these subtle little differences
Mhm.
are are huge because if you look at just wedding planning in general, and you look at all the millions of articles of advice out there, you
Mhm.
know, not all of that advice would work at a sober wedding because you need those little fidgety things to do.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, I have this entire rant. There is a draft in my Substack about dry weddings and how
Ooh.
people are. So yeah, I'm trying to find some people actually that had dry weddings, that like to talk about the reaction because I very just tangentially mentioned that on threads recently, and a couple of people responded and said, "Yeah, we said we're gonna have a dry wedding, and people said they're not coming because there's no alcohol at the wedding." And to me, that is just one of the most insane things. And I've seen other things in the past about people complaining that there wasn't an open bar at a wedding, and I'm like, well, at what point did that become the point of the wedding? Isn't that so? That to me is one of the most, I try to be like very measured about how I talk about alcohol and the role that alcohol has in society. But people being mad at alcohol-free weddings or weddings that don't have open bars is it so I can't even find the words for it. I am so upset. I'm so mad at it because I'm like, what the hell is your problem? That you're not able to get completely wasted when the whole point of the wedding is to celebrate the two people getting married and celebrate them having a great day. And you're there as a guest. This is not about you. This is not about you getting drunk for free. What the fuck is wrong with you? It makes me incredibly mad that people have that attitude, honestly, where it's like, so you think you can't handle just being like not drinking for a few hours? What's going on? And yeah, I have this entire post. Like I want to talk about it more because I think it's just outrageous that this is even an issue. Like that there is even one person who complains about it rather than just saying like, yeah, whatever. I'm here to celebrate the people getting married. Like whether I drink or not, like sure, I would like to have something to eat at some point because after a few hours of ceremony and dancing and whatever, right? Like you need some sustenance and it would be nice to have some nice drink to celebrate with, but it doesn't matter whether it should not matter whether it has alcohol or not. So yeah, there's a that's a whole can of worms, I think, that is probably going to become more and more of a thing in the next few years, for sure.
Yeah, and I'm glad it's going to be a thing because, when I was growing up, I always wanted to be married. I always imagined being a wife and all the things. So, growing up, my idea of a wedding was very different from the one
Mhm.
that happened once I became sober, and my husband is sober as well. So, it was interesting because like a lot of our guests, literally 50% of our guests were like all people that worked with us at the Kava bar. So they already
Oh,
got it.
nice. Yeah, yeah.
And then our family, for the most part, got it. But I will
Hmm.
say this, though there was a few members that of our family that we were like, they're probably not going to stay long because they are
Hmm.
very into drinking alcohol. But the thing
Hmm.
is, they had the respect to sit down for dinner,
Yeah,
enjoy that, and then they left right after. Like they didn't
yeah,
want to party, which was totally fine. We were like, that was the best perfect
yeah.
compromise. You can go ahead and go drink.
Mm,
We don't hold anything against you. Bride and groom don't have time to talk to everybody all the time
mm,
anyway. So they stayed for the important photos and then they
mm,
left, and it was wonderful.
mm,
That being said, there was a lot of like venue garbage we got. Like
mm,
that was probably one of the hardest parts where, you know, we've been super busy with our business, but one of the side projects I always wanted to do was reach out to like wedding coordinators and like
mm,
educate them because
mm,
we had gotten so the first venue that we had, um, and we'd booked it over a year ahead of time because we wanted a fall Western
mm,
wedding, and they literally had to cancel us. It was like January, so we had like 10 months before the wedding. So we had time, but they canceled us because the entire city that this was in Prescott, Arizona, the entire city of Prescott literally sent them a cease and desist order because they had too rowdy of alcoholic drinking, like
Wow.
people, right? Yeah. So it ruined weddings and their entire business for them. Meanwhile, I had had the conversation with them months prior to that event
Hmm.
occurring, saying, hey, not only are we, we're your clients because we want to get married here, but know that like we are professionals in this industry. We're happy to help you. And they
Hmm.
had already alluded to the fact that they were starting to have issues. And we
Hmm.
were like, well, there's ways to circumvent that. You can have an
Hmm.
alcohol bar, maybe cut it off at 8 p.m.
Yeah.
whenever lights out is, because it was a venue that was kind of in a neighborhood area.
Mm,
Of course, they didn't listen to that advice. They lost their whole business. So we were like, okay, well, we'll find another. So we go
yeah.
to this farm that's still in the Prescott area, and everything was going great. Everything was perfect. We mentioned what we wanted to bring to the table. And then they were like, oh, sorry, actually, you can only do lemonade and iced tea. And we were like, okay, well, once
Oh,
again, we are actual like professionals in this
yeah.
industry. If you'd like, we'll give you a free consultation and everything. Like, we
Hmm.
just want to help you because not only is this our wedding, but this was a farm in the
Hmm.
outskirts of Prescott, which means you'd have to drive drunk to go anywhere
Yeah.
for all
Oh,
of our guests to
yeah.
sleep. So we were like, hey, we have this really cool wine. It's a locally made CBD wine. And the
Hmm.
moment they heard CBD, they got scared and they were like, well, we don't want
Mm.
to lose our farm. And we were like, okay, well, fair enough. There might be some weird federal farm
Hmm.
regulation there. So we'll move on. We finally found a third venue. We had to change city entirely. We ended up
Mm.
going to this other really cool part of Arizona, but that venue, not only did they not care, but they had invited us back for like anytime they have other brides and grooms that are interested in
Oh, nice.
non-alc. Yeah, so it was like after having this like very emotional journey of just trying to get the venue together, we were like, okay, well, at least that's taken care of. So then once we had all of the guests who were come, like we made sure we only had a guest list of 50 people. No, it
Mhm.
ended up being 43 because we had all of those thoughts. We were like, look, there are other people in our lives that we would love to invite here, but you know, anybody out there who's listening who's also sober understands that sometimes you need an entire change of scenery, you need a change of friend group, you need a change of some things sometimes in order to get out of old bad habits.
Mm,
So we had friends and family who, yeah, we would have loved to have there, but we knew that like they they wouldn't even respond. Like I had a
yeah.
friend who was like, she was my mentor when I was younger. Like
Mm,
she did everything. Uh, she was my second boss actually, and she had turned into like she'd owned a company, done all these things, like and taught me the ropes of my first non-alc job. And she gave me so much confidence to turn me into the manager. I became all these things. Like
mhm,
this woman really made me very similarly to the way that my mom did. Like that's how close this person was.
mhm,
I had invited her to our wedding, but she didn't even respond to it. And ever since I've put out like, a lot of our marketing and all the things, she is,
mhm.
ever since I started talking about sobriety, she won't even talk to me. And I
Oh.
and I know for a fact that her family does suffer from some alcoholism that
Mhm,
they're
mhm,
like
mhm.
currently working on, but apparently my entire life was too triggering for them to even
Oof.
attend the wedding, to even respond to it. Nothing. Like
Yeah.
nothing. And
Oh
it
my
was just
God.
so crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's like I said, I mean, it's easy to say for me because I sort of randomly decided to stop drinking and then I stopped drinking and that was it. That's my story. So for me, sobriety or just not drinking is like it was a very easy kind of experience. As I worked through sort of my history of drinking, sort of in hindsight, I realized it was a bigger issue than I thought, but the whole like quitting drinking was like fairly easy for me. So I think I might also be lacking some, you know, understanding of how severe and how triggering it can be for a lot of people. Um, but I always still think like even if something is triggering for you, like there is some just common, you know, common courtesy, I guess, especially with someone who is your friend to at least say no, thank you, right? Like that's um I feel like that should still be part of it rather than just throwing your hands up and saying, well, I can't just do that at all and I can't talk to that person. That's yeah, that's a really rough experience. And like I said, like just the whole concept of like people being upset about sober events is just baffling to me. Um
Right. It's wild, especially when there are so many sober things we do every day. Like,
exactly, exactly. No one would go when I tell people like, oh, we're I don't know, hosting a alcohol-free event, like an alcohol-free social mixer, people are like, "Oh my God, that is crazy. Why would you do that?" If I said we're hosting a social mixer on a Saturday afternoon at a coffee shop, everyone would be like, "Oh, that sounds great." Even though it's the exact same thing, there's no alcohol involved, right? But it's literally just the expectation of like, oh, it's a bar, there should be alcohol. It's a wedding, there should be alcohol, right? Um, Whereas yeah, exactly, we do so many things sober, and that's totally fine and no one questions it. I actually wrote a post about that on my Substack recently where I talked about the growth of like the growing popularity of tea houses, especially tea houses that are open late
mm,
as sort of third places, gathering places, date spots and all of that. And I actually just based on like the last 2 years almost of doing Third Place Bar, I just see how incredibly resistant people are to the concept of an alcohol-free bar because they question, well, it's a bar, there should be alcohol, duh. Rather than seeing it as what it is, which is a gathering place, right? A bar, like the word pub comes from like the public, what is it called? I'm missing the historical context here, but it's basically like the public gathering place, right? Or public house. Sorry, it's public house. So it really is like the word pub comes from sort of the concept of it as a gathering place rather than a place to consume alcohol. And I think a lot of people are just, not aware of the fact that the main function of a bar or any kind of place like this is really it's a gathering place rather than a place to consume alcohol because if that was the case, everyone could just be consuming alcohol at home for a lot less money. So, um, but there is still a lot of resistance to the concept of an alcohol-free bar. So I actually said tea houses that are open late or even late night coffee shops, but tea houses seem to just be growing in popularity at the moment, are extremely attractive, I think, from that kind of perspective, from a business perspective, because no one will question why there's no alcohol at a tea house. And if it's open
Mm.
late, oh my God, it's a tea house. It's open till 10. That's amazing, right? Rather than, oh, it's a bar that, without alcohol. Like, what's wrong with them? Um, so I do think that is one of the trends that's going to happen in the next few years, kind of along with what you said earlier about alcohol-free events being like more wellness focused and all that. I do think there will be more alcohol-free spaces like tea houses, late night coffee shops, or other third places, other concepts that are also open late that are really attractive that don't even necessarily talk about what's missing, right? Then they don't even talk about, oh, this is alcohol free, but the concept itself is just naturally alcohol free. And that just leads to a lot less resistant. It's just so much more of an easier sell. Um,
Mm.
so yeah, that's my prediction there.
That's true. And that really goes to like it speaks the point of like know your market,
Hmm.
speak to them because you can be offering one thing, but depending on how it's perceived, you're going to
Yeah.
have different people showing up. So really meeting your people where they're at
Hmm.
and understanding, okay, what is the essence? What's the point of this event? Who am I trying to serve? Who am I trying to help? And am I speaking to them or am I trying to speak to everyone? Because if I
Hmm.
speak to everyone, no one might show up.
Yeah.
So, thank you so much for this incredible episode full of so much knowledge. I could talk to you forever and ever. I have so many
Hmm.
things. But all of that being said, I'd love to wrap this up with well, actually, two tiny questions.
Hmm.
First question, if you could wave a wand right now and just boop, you get exactly what you want to make your job much easier in the non-alc industry, what would it be?
Oh, wow. Um, I think I would love to have an assistant. I would love to hire someone to help with all the things that I'm doing. I think that is the main thing, and establish a relationship with a venue where I can host recurring events just because that makes it easier to schedule. So I think for me personally, it's streamlining the work that I'm doing and making it a little bit less of a heavy lift. Like I just explained in a lot of detail, like all the steps involved. So I think that is probably the next step for me.
Ooh, I love it. Love it. And it just goes to show that if you want to be a part of this industry, you don't have to always start your own business. There are plenty of people out there who need your help right now, who really are just as passionate,
Hmm.
and want to be a part of the things. So all that being said, anyone out there listening in New York, just reach out to Sam.
Hit me up, hit me up.
Yes. Last question for you today. Is there anything coming up in Third Place Bar NYC that you want to promote and tell us about?
Ooh, so currently for this month, I'm still taking a summer break. So July and August are my slow months, and I decided to just host as few events as possible. So I did one event per month, which is really nice. I did some brand work, but I have a lot of events coming up in September and October. Obviously, Sober October is our busy season. So I would just suggest everyone sign up for our newsletter on our Substack. And I send out a free biweekly newsletter on that Substack, and everyone will get event updates right into their inbox as soon as everything is announced.
Beautiful. And if you are listening to this episode right now, go ahead and just look at the description of this episode. You'll be able to see the link and all of the things. Thank you so much, Sam, for being here and sharing all of your knowledge and wisdom with us. I know the world is a much better place with you in it.
Thank you so much, Marina. I appreciate it.
Yeah, as always, if anyone out there has any questions, comments, go ahead and send us an email, hello@marinamars.com, and we will be sure to get it all answered for you. In the meantime, if you need anything, just let me know.